In this lecture, we are going to add a menu to our toolbar. The menu we are going to work with in this lecture is a pop-up menu. The pop-up menu is used in most applications and is very useful. Its mechanism is that we define a couple of items already, and by selecting the option button, a list of our items is displayed inside a box, and for each item we can define a specific function. Okay, to add a pop-up menu to our toolbar, the first thing we have to do is to make a layer for our menu. For this purpose, I right-click on the resource folder, and from the new section, I select Android resource file. You see that the new resource file window opens up for us. At the file name section, I enter an arbitrary name for my layer. For example, menu underscore main. In the resource type section, I define my layer to be of the menu type. And OK. Alright, our menu is ready. I go to text section, and inside my layer I define a couple of items. To define items, I open the item tag and enter. For my item, I define a couple of attributes. My first attribute deals with my item's title. I type Android : title. Now I have to define the title of my item inside this attribute. For example, I type item 1. Okay. The next attribute is Android : ID. I define an ID for my item, @ plus ID /. For example, I set its ID as item 1 underscore ID. I close the item with /. Just as simply, I defined an item, gave it a title and an ID. Note that Android Studio has given us a warning which says it's better that our title is defined inside strings.xml. I bring the cursor over Android title, Alt and Enter. I click on Extract String Resource and OK. We see that the warning for Android title attribute is gone. If you go to Values folder and open strings.xml file, you see that Android Studio has automatically created our file inside strings.xml, and there was no need for us to do this manually. Very easy and quick. This way I'm going to define my next items as well. I open the item tag, enter, and type Android : title. I set the title for my second item to item 2. Okay, I type Android : ID @ plus ID /. For example, I set its ID to item 2 underscore ID. With / I close my item. And that's it for the second item. I define the next item, enter, and type Android : title, and set the title for the third item, item 3. Okay, and type Android : ID @ plus ID /. For example, I set its ID to item 3 underscore ID, and I close my item with a slash. These 3 items are sufficient for now. Depending on your need, you can add as many items as you want in order in this layer. Okay, we're done with the menu layer. I go to Java folder and open the main activity class. To add the pop-up menu to our toolbar, we need 2 methods. We have to add these 2 methods after onCreate in our Java class. To this purpose, I go to the code menu and click on override methods. The first method that we need is onCreate options menu. I type onCreate option and I click on this method. By clicking on OK, I add this method to my Java class. Alright, the onCreate options menu method was added to my class. This way I add the second method to my class as well. And for the second method I type an option item and I click on this method, click on OK, and this method is added to my Java class as well. Alright, so far we added 2 methods to our main activity class. The onCreate options method adds pop-up menu to our toolbar. Inside this menu, I get rid of return statement and type get menu inflator dot inflate. Inside the parentheses, it asks me for a layer. Okay, I declare the layer that I created for my menu to this method. I type r.menu underscore main, comma. For the menu parameter, I'm going to pass it the input parameter of the method. Since the output value of this method is Boolean type, I return the true value. This way. Okay, we declared the menu layer using getMenuInflator to our class in order to add pop-up menu to our toolbar. Let's run our project so far on the emulator. Alright, our application is run. In the right side of the toolbar, you see the option button. I click on the button. Okay, as we expected, the pop-up menu has been added to our toolbar, and here we can see the items that we defined inside our menu layer. Item 1, item 2, and item 3. Now we must define a certain function for each item. I stop the emulator. When we select each item of the pop-up menu, the onOptionSelected method will run. Within this method, you can define a specific function for each item using conditional statements. On the first line, I define an integer variable and name it id equals item dot get item id and semicolon, which means get the ID of the user's selected item and save it in the ID variable. Now using the if command, I type if id equals r dot id dot item underscore id, which means if item 1 is selected by the user, Then execute the instructions of this block. Else, if id equals r.id.item2 underscore id, which means if item 2 is selected by the user, then execute the codes inside this block. Else, otherwise, if id equals r.id.item3 underscore id, which means if item 3 is selected by the user, then execute the code inside this block. This way. Alright, using the id variable, we specified a condition for each of our items. For each item, you can enter your desired code inside the if blocks. To check whether our condition works or not, I'm going to use the toast command. Inside the block for my first item, I'm going to type toast dot make text. Inside the parentheses, a context is requested. I use the get application context method, 1 comma, double quotation, and I enter my desired text. Item 1 is selected. Again a comma, and I set its duration to short. And finally I type .show for my toast. Okay, I copy the toast that I defined and paste within the second and third blocks. But I change its text. Alright, we're done with the main activity class. We defined a toast for each of the pop-up menu items, and by selecting each of them, our toast with the desired text is displayed to the user. We run our project on the emulator. Alright, our application is running on an emulator for Nexus 6. I open pop-up menu and select my first item. Alright, as we expected, by selecting the first item, a toast is displayed and the condition works. I select my second item. Item 2 is selected, and that's the same for the third item. Alright, that's it for our pop-up menu. You saw that we were able to easily add a pop-up menu with 3 items to our toolbar. Make sure you do this for yourself. Create a pop-up menu and add a couple of items to it, and master the materials of this lecture. In the next lecture, we will do more things with pop-up menus.